Kick things off as I've tried to do with each session. Thank you all for being here. I try to vary this up a little bit for those of you that have been in multiple sessions, but really want to thank you all for being here. It really is a testament to the dedication you show your students, that you're here trying to learn from each other so that we can improve what we do in the spring based on our experiences in March and in the fall. Thank you very much for your dedication to your students. Thank you for being here. I want to also thank Susie. For those of you who don't know Susie, you will learn in the next hour that she is the most goddamn relentlessly positive person you have ever met in your life. And I say that with all the love and affection in the world. But she's fantastic, and she's getting help today by Josh Westwick, who ran a fantastic session the other day with Susie's help. So, I think they're both gonna do a great job today. So I want to thank them for their dedication to helping all of us work our ways through this as facilitators. Just with every session that we've put together, this is a discussion-oriented session. Make sure you use the chat room, raise your hand, share your experiences and your ideas, because that's really what this is about. Josh and Susie have just they're kind of guides for the discussion so that we can keep things, relatively constrained to the topic. But really hope you find this of value. I feel like, I see people coming back. So I think that, at least those who've been to other sessions have found some value in this, which makes me feel really good. Because I think this is something that, at least for me, that I feel like I've needed for a while. And I'm really grateful to everybody for being here. And I'm grateful for Fountainhead Press and their support. Those of you who don't know me, you should know that I am technologically challenged. I'm not allowed to work the microwave in my own house. So the idea that I could facilitate a Zoom session or 14 Zoom sessions is crazy. So couldn't do it without their help and support. So I really want to thank them for that. You all should have received your $5 coffee from them, which again, grateful for. There's going to be a raffle at the end for 3 rather more significant prizes, and we'll loop back with everybody to let everybody know who won next week. $7 coffee, my bad, Peter. But that's because you went Starbucks. Again, really hope you enjoyed the discussion today. Grateful to Susie, grateful to Josh, Fountainhead, but really mostly to all of you for sharing your experiences with each other, because I think that's going to help all of our students in the spring. So with that, Susie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe. And I don't know that I'm really that happy. I don't know, maybe. But Josh, it looks like we have 27 in. Do you think we ought to do the breakouts, or what do you think?
I'll leave that up to you, Susie. I think, we can maybe have a little bit more in-depth conversation if we were to do the breakouts for a little bit at the time and then come back to the larger group.
Okay, I think that sounds good. Let me just give a quick kind of overview, and then we'll kind of drop into groups, and then we'll come back. So good afternoon, everyone. It is really nice to have so many people join us. As we talked about yesterday and Joe mentioned today, I know how busy everybody is, and for you to take the time to join us is wonderful. This is going to be a discussion. There were just a few things that I wanted us to think about, maybe guiding questions, if you will. They're pretty simple. To all of you, is the communication apprehension we're seeing in our students, is that different this term than we've seen in the past? And if so, how? Also, what's working? What things are we doing online or in our face-to-face or in our mixed mode classrooms that seems to be helping to mitigate the anxiety or maybe even reducing it in some way, and what isn't? Because some of the things are not. And then finally, what can we take from this and use it to guide our pedagogy and our efficacy and the empowerment of our students moving forward? So those are the the 3 things I wanted to again, just as a really loose guide as we chat with one another before we go to breakout rooms. The other thing I want to share is just before, I was starting this. I got an email from a student. I'm sure you've all had similar ones. This was from a student who evidently has taken one of our traditional classes and did not do very well. And in this student's words, has had crippling anxiety and was hoping that I could help them. On my campus, I have been very fortunate to have some sections for highly speech anxious students. And so it now has a reputation on the campus, and a lot of the advisors know to send students my way. I'm sure all of you have had similar emails, some probably even more dire from students. And so I just thought it was a little kind of good timing that it happened just before we talked about this, because we can all think of some ways to empower and help our students. I would suspect for every one email we are sent, there's probably upwards of 10 to 20 that never get sent, that students either don't know who they can send it to, they don't feel comfortable sending it, or they just don't even think that that resource is out there. So for all the emails we get, there's so many more stories that we're not hearing. So just throw those couple things out. Josh did just put in the chat that if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already, just put your name and your affiliation in the chat box for us, and that is so that Fountainhead can have a record of everyone who's attended. So that would be most appreciated. Josh, I'm going to go ahead and try to do this breakout room thing, and we'll see how this goes. And we'll do breakout rooms for maybe about 20 or 25 minutes, and then we'll come back and chat, because I think it's really important to hear what everyone has to say as well. So again, thank you all, and let me figure out this breakout room thing, and I'm excited about it, and I'm telling it to do it. So let's see how that works. All right. Hi, everyone. Hey, I think I jumped in here. Oh gosh, this is great. It's so nice to see everybody. I don't want to speak much. I really want to hear what all of you have to say, and success stories or questions, or just, do we want to start with kind of the first one? Is COMAP different this semester? And if so, how, and what are we doing? And I'm going to take some notes too. So whoever wants to jump in. Hi, Charlotte, again. Nice to see you again. I'm going to just mute myself and let us have a discussion. Hi, Jill.
I'll start. So I do think it's different this semester. I'm actually teaching hybrid, so I have them part of the time in class, part of the time online. But I think that because they don't know each other, it's much scarier for them to speak. So I do a lot in my class to build a community and make them comfortable. And I can't do any of that right now. Even when we're face to face, they can't get in groups, things like that. So I found that they don't know who they're speaking to, and there's not that sense of community. And I think they're very anxious. Like, for the first time ever this semester, I had multiple students stand up to speak and then say, like, I need to go take a break. And that's usually a rare occurrence in my class, but it was multiple times this semester. So I just think it's that lack of community that's making it worse.
I will say we teach a traditional public speaking course, and it's been really interesting to me because there's a group of students who in the spring we kind of had to go asynchronous, and people needed to upload videos kind of at first because we were getting ready for speeches. And there was a surprising number of students who reported back to me that they were more anxious, more apprehensive about their video, recorded it so many times, and that they wish they would have just been able to speak in front of the group because that would have been so much easier for them. And then there was also this group who was very happy to do the video, who really liked that kind of control and curation, and that like lessened their anxiety. And I've just been thinking a lot about that as we move forward, and potentially incorporating both options, or having kind of multiple modalities for presenting in different ways, maybe picking one way or another. But it was just really interesting to me, the number of students who reported increased apprehension about a pre-recorded video that they had to submit.
Hi, I teach online fully and traditionally online students. And a lot of the students who come my way find the anonymity appealing, the opposite of what Anna discussed. But I also think a lot of that is tied to expectations. When my students are registering for my class, they know what it's going to be like. But I think when we've violated students' expectations of what they thought the experience would be, that makes it a lot more scary.
Yeah, I've had the same kind of experience. I think students seem to have a problem differentiating between giving a speech and shooting a video. And I can't get them to move away from putting in, which I think are beautiful, graphics, music background, you know, cuts, this and that, billboards and stuff. I'm like, no, this is not a film class. It's a public speaking class. Don't sit and talk to the monitor, stand up. I want to see you with note cards. If you got, I can't tell them to have an audience because the school says you can't. You'd have to encourage them to go out and expose themselves to COVID-19 potentially. So I can't ask them to have an audience. But, you know, on the one hand, I have to tell them I love your video, but no, that's not what I'm looking for. But it seems like, and I had the same experience y'all were talking about, where some students would record and record and record over and over again, looking for the perfect speech, and then tell me I finally gave up. I'm like, good, you shouldn't be doing that. And others said I could look at it and see if I liked it and then hand it in, and that made me feel a whole lot better. But it still seems like there are some students that are just born to give speeches and others that freak out. And I still see that line in the background, but yeah, how they express themselves through the video seems to be another layer of complication.
We've had a relatively positive experience, and I guess I shouldn't say we, because I think there's been a variety of experiences. I oversee our grad instructors for the public speaking program, but I also have 4 of my own sections right now, and I teach fully online. I've been teaching online in Zoom in real time, and I think that real time has been the most interesting because I agree that I see a lot of different preferences. So that I have students who say, I miss the audience, I need to speak to people. And when they say that, they do much better when they share their screen if they do it from gallery view, so there are at least 5 people. And that we usually have to ask for volunteers because we're recording. And we say, okay, are there any 5 willing to show your face just to support your peers? And usually there's 5 who will step up just so the person feels like they're talking to someone. It's been really important that we use feedback in the chat as each speech goes, that there's a sense of more immediacy, that people are saying, ooh, I loved how you did this. And so I don't let them make generic comments. They have to say specifically, I liked your examples, or I really liked this slide that you had. And so trying to help it feel like people are paying attention and not that they've drifted off is helping us through that. The ones that don't like the audience at all, certainly they can kind of zone out and not go to gallery view and not have as many people up there. We make them step back so we can see most of their body, at least to their lower hip on the screen. And so that does make it harder, again, to see small thumbnails and feel like you're actually talking to people. But definitely pieces, and this came from, we talked about in the other workshop earlier this week, of how do you build that community, of just lots of before class, what's happening for people, you know, who's sick, what did you do over Thanksgiving, lots of the small talk has helped build that sense of this is personal and not just kind of a jump in, get up and talk, you're done, and we're all done with class type of experience. But it's very tricky.
Stephanie, when you mentioned giving feedback in the chat, was that immediate feedback? Like as it's happening, people are posting, or you have a time after the speech is done that people post?
So as we transition from one speaker to another, now we did have one speech where we did a Q&A, and I liked that very much, so they could actually do more back and forth interaction. So they were allowed to walk up to the screen, sit down, so they could see people, stop sharing their screen, and then do Q&A. But no, the feedback is after the speaker.
Okay, thanks. So since I've asked the question, I'll keep going. So I teach mainly in a workshop format. I'll be teaching a public speaking class in the winter, but the last 2 quarters I've been mainly delivering just-in-time presentation skills workshops, working with students who are preparing to give a presentation. And so far what I found is the majority of students say that they're less anxious in this mode because they feel more comfortable being at home. They actually like not being able to see the audience. And so it's a little bit of a, double-edged sword how to respond to that. But then, of course, there are those who miss, as I think Stephanie said, they miss being able to see the audience, and it's very disconcerting for those students to not be able to have that feedback, and in a sense, they kind of give up. There's like, why bother gesturing because nobody can see them anyway? So I get those reactions. I know for myself, and I think this is true for students as well, even if they're not as conscious about it, is that whatever comfort that we get from being behind a screen with this mediated mode of interaction is gone because of the anxiety we get from the technology. So I think that that's a different source of anxiety that comes into presenting online. It's like you're having to multitask, I can't, 1 out of 3 times I don't share my screen properly still. So there's that to reckon with. So, and we've also found too that the whole access to technology is a real, it's just really difficult in terms of teaching public speaking, because a lot of my colleagues who've been teaching courses, they don't require live. I mean, they've actually resorted to just doing them asynchronously, which to me is such a travesty. But they found that because of time zone differences, because of students not feeling comfortable with their backgrounds or just having internet problems, that it is so difficult logistically to expect students to deliver a synchronous presentation. So a lot of them just will record it. And so that there's that as well. I don't know how that, I guess that is related to anxiety, but it just all goes together in terms of managing all these variables.
Thanks, Helen. And it does play in. And one common theme I'm hearing from a lot of people is that technology, in some cases, added a whole nother level of anxiety for our students. In a few cases, it didn't. Those who are really tech experienced or very comfortable, maybe shooting their own videos for fun or do a lot of posting or stuff, they not so much. But for most of our students, the technology adds another level of anxiety. And Helen, this was my first time with breakout rooms, believe it or not. So I know exactly how you feel right before we were going to go. I'm going to try it for the first time. If it's okay with everyone, let's transition kind of into the second one. And I'm really interested in this one, is what's working. Let's start on the positive note. Like, what have we found this semester, despite all the challenges, that it is working, are ways that we're helping our students manage their anxiety?
For me and for my colleagues, even like creating a very comfortable classroom environment and emphasizing that the grades will not be negatively impacted if something technologically goes wrong, and trying to encourage students that, hey, we're all in this together, learning how to present in this modality. So let this be a learning experience for all of us. I think that's how we've approached it, at least when the pandemic started. Now we're starting to realize that students are not performing as well because they're reading their scripts, and so it's just hard to find that balance because students are overwhelmed in general. There's a lot more stress and loneliness, and with all this the upheaval in our country that was been happening over the past few months, it's just difficult to know how much you can really, you don't want to say that you're lowering standards, but there's so much emphasis on the care of the whole student that you just have to find that balance. So I don't know. That's how we've been kind of wrestling with this. Yeah.
It is. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We also have seen our share of reading the script off to the side and making it tricky. I had somebody share with me by accident that they had created a narrow script. So it was not as wide on the screen, so it didn't look like their eyes were moving as much because the script was narrow and long going down. I was like, wow, that was really creative. But so in some ways, I feel like they've added to their anxiety by reading and not learning extemporaneous public speaking, which has made me sad. I think kind of going outside of the classroom, one thing that's been an interesting perk is moving our speech lab online, where we have consultants who will let you practice with them, has now become so much more accessible that the traffic's up. And so people who were very, very nervous before, it's as easy for them to just not even leave home. They can click and suddenly talk to somebody about how nervous they are. That's not their teacher, it's not their classroom. So that's been an interesting side perk that's helped with the anxiety.
I think one of the big things that helps with anxiety is to help students understand and recognize that there is a distinct difference between delivering a presentation through a mediated channel such as Zoom versus delivering it in the classroom. There are some distinct differences in how you prepare for that, how you do it, and then how you evaluate and reflect on that. And so I think that when we help them understand those differences, it actually reduces anxiety levels. If we expect them to do on Zoom exactly what we expect them to do in the classroom, I think that does heighten the anxiety for exactly the reasons Stephanie talked about. It's a whole lot easier to read on Zoom, and it's a whole lot more comfortable to read on Zoom because you're worrying about different kinds of things in that environment than you would be in the classroom environment.
When I start my classes each semester and I ask them to tell me just a short email about themselves, that students will often take that opportunity to tell me if they struggle and they have a great fear of taking the course. I'm sure all of you do something similar. So I'm always taking a note of that. And then I try to reinforce with students throughout the semester, either individually or in some group activities or discussion posts of things you can do. And the thing that I found to be most successful for my students in reducing their anxiety is talking about the factors that they can control. What can you control? You can control creating a really good outline and researching accordingly and rehearsing. Those factors you can control. And one of the benefits of teaching this course asynchronously is that they can control the speech experience. It's not as it's not as true to form as a traditional course by any means. And yes, you'll have some students who probably make multiple videos. But if you are a person for whom public speaking is extremely anxiety inducing, it does afford you some sense of control.
These are all great, really, really great suggestions. Thank you all. We'll open the door to this Pandora's box a little bit. What isn't working in the online? What do we want to share it just, despite our best efforts, has not gone as well online.
We've been struggling with attendance and people double booking themselves going to work, which again, I don't want to make light of people's like financial situations or anything like that, but just a lot of missing class, just a higher percentage than typical for when we have our face-to-face sections.
I think some of the, sorry about that, Charlotte. Some of the technology works on a desktop or a laptop, but doesn't work on a cell phone. And so when students try to turn work in on their cell phone, it doesn't log in. And so that's something I didn't know, but that's the format that they use the most often. They spend like, what, 80% of their day on their phone. You know, I mean, that's 80% of their communication. So that's something. And so some of the technology doesn't work on both formats, you know, that's been interesting. I think also too, is we've had students been telling themselves, or they've been told by themselves they're the technology generation, but they're really good consumers. They're not good creators of it. And so they have these phones that do these miraculous wonder things, but it's mainly dating apps. I know that's old man talking, or, you know, TikTok and stuff like that, but it's not, they don't use all the stuff that it can do possibly. So their technology knowledge base is really limited.
And I wanted to add to what I think it was Jill said about people not coming to class, and they've got every excuse in the planet. And my class was set up as asynchronous. So I was teaching 3 classes of public speaking asynchronously. And I wanted the students to speak to me, you know, through Zoom or Teams or whatever. And I sat online, I think I mentioned this in one of the other talks, but I sat online for 2 hours every week waiting for people to come in and give speeches. No one, no show, you know. And I've said, make an appointment. I will just talk to me and you. A number of people said, yeah, sounds good. No show. So then we're getting to the end of the semester, and then the only option left was for them to record their speeches. So much as I feel like, you know, I completely agree that is not public speaking. That is not the way it should be. But I looked in the inbox and I'd said, okay, you can either record it or you can talk to me, your choice. And all these speeches are lining up, you know, the recordings are all stacking up there. And then it's the end of the semester, I can't give them any feedback. So I just want to do something that does not repeat that. Definitely. So still trying to figure out how to work that out, because there seems to be no time when I can get everybody to come into the class, even get 3 of them to show up regularly. It's just doesn't seem to happen. And I don't want to spend 4 hours of my week every week waiting online for people to not show up. So that's kind of been my dilemma. And now I'm getting some ideas though now about how I can get around that. So I appreciate that.
Charlotte, one of the ways that I have dealt with that is that I open Zoom and I call it kind of student time, but I stick it down in the corner of my screen and I have a waiting room. So I know when a student comes and I can drop whatever it is that I'm working on at that point and go to the student, as opposed to just sitting there and waiting for them or just working on email. So I found that the waiting room is a helpful process there.
Yeah, and I did do that. It's just, you know, maybe it's me, but I don't like having to be available specifically at a particular time of day. And yeah, I'm as bad as my students. I want it to be on my time, you know. But no, that was what I was doing, and it does work better than some of the other options I could think of. I just wish people had taken advantage of it. That would have made me feel a lot better about it. But no, and I should learn to use the waiting room too. I didn't do that, so that's a good option. I'll have to try that.
And quite honestly, they frequently don't come to our in-person office hours either. So at least on our campus, that's the case. Going back to Susie's original question, I'm not sure that this is unique to the online environment, but I think that one of the things that happens is we don't always address the communication anxiety at the lower levels. So in those basic courses, we don't always address it. And so it just exacerbates over the course of their time on campus. And then they leave campus and they're still in that situation where they get excessively anxious. So I think that that's one of the things that I notice more now in the online environment than I did before, but I think it's been there for a very long time.
On that note, Michelle, one of the things I have them do, I was just reading their self-evaluations for the end of the semester. Compare your first speech to your last speech. That's another benefit of them recording their speeches. They can go back and see their own progress. But I include a question in there, you know, what is, I don't remember how it's phrased, but your perception of your fear of public speaking, has it improved or not? And it kind of leaves a nice note at the end of the semester, and maybe that seed gets planted then their sophomore year when they have to do a presentation in their nursing class, that having to give a speech isn't the worst thing in the world, hopefully.
That's a great question, Joe. I really like that.
And I think that's really great, what Michelle mentioned, and then Joe gave us a great example, but if we can begin that conversation in our basic courses, that speech anxiety is very, very common. It's also very manageable. We can almost turn it into empowerment. Then when they reach the senior and capstone courses and the upper level ones, like what Michelle teaches on our campus, but also when they go to interview. Right now, we've got a lot of students who are interviewing on Zoom. And for a lot of them, where they've gotten good experience on how to do Zoom has been in our classes. And maybe we didn't see that direct link before COVID, but I know when I talk to my students about teaching online, and I taught online before, and I choose to teach online. But that's one of the, kind of my selling points was, you're going to probably have to do this more and more in your job to get a job. Now they're all having to do it. But I think we have that ability to reframe what we do in our classes as something that's so value added down the road. And maybe our traditional kind of platform oratory setup didn't have that same, oh, you're going to use this. But what we do online actually is going to have, I think, more of that efficacy and that usability and that transferability down the road. I can't remember what I said to Josh about when we were returning from breakout rooms, but I suspect it's going to be in a few minutes. So I wanted ask to kind of finish on this one. What ideas do we have to really, I personally see communication anxiety as just a reverse empowerment. Our students don't feel empowered, and part of my job, and I think what all of us who teach the basic course, what we want to do is empower them. Give them the ability to share their story and share their voice. So what ideas do we have to improve it? How can we do that better? We're going to end on that one before we all get out of our breakout rooms.
Can you phrase that question again, Susie, please?
Yeah, just I get kind of excited, unfortunately, like Joe said. And so it kind of goes all over the place. But the way I wrote it down here, Joe, was ideas to improve what we're doing to reduce their students' anxiety and to empower them. So any ideas that we have for just all that good stuff moving forward. Did that help, Joe? Okay.
I don't have any ideas, but thanks for rephrasing it.
I think I alluded to this before, and I don't know how well it's going to work, but I am going to try to give some options, especially early in the semester, for how they'd like to present. Their first speech especially, we kind of tend to do some low stakes things at the beginning, and so maybe providing kind of from a UDL perspective a multimodal format or way of submitting that first lower stakes speech might be kind of a way to build up their confidence moving forward in the course.
I'll speak specifically to our purely online class. One of the things, because it's quite big, it has 180 students, and so it's broken into segments of about 25 with graders for each of those segments. And I know that with the graders, it's really important to stick on them as far as talking about the change they've seen, and that tends to reduce the anxiety is if they give really strong strokes of look how different this is. I see the difference. You know, there was a big change. And so kind of a lot of that pat on the back of remembering what did happen, which is super hard, I think, in the online class, of what happened in the last speech, and being able to really comment on what's already moved along the scale.
Can I put a wish list improvement on there? If anybody has like a wish list or an idea for, you've got half of your people in class, you've got half of your people on a platform, which for us is Teams. My wish list is to improve the interaction some way, or the class dynamic, so it doesn't feel like you have two classes going simultaneously and are not serving either one of them.
Jill, have you been doing that already? Okay.
Yeah, we have our freshmen on campus. And so, and the capacity of each room is such that you put 50% of people online and 50% of people on Teams, and then you rotate the days. And it's challenging to engage both groups simultaneously. And we've had a lot of struggles with trying to get group dynamics going between the folks that are online and the folks who are sitting in the classroom. And so that has been very challenging. And then even though people are slated to come certain days, and I don't have a problem, but even though they're slated to come certain days, if they don't feel well or don't feel safe coming to class, they can be online. So you never know how many students you're going to have in either location. And so that has been a real challenging thing for, you know, my grad students have handled it really, really well, but it's definitely a challenge.
Jill, that's how my, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, Jill, would you drop your email in the chat? We start High Flex in the spring, so I might be really curious to hear more.
I don't know if you want to hear from me. Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Jill, I was just going to say that's how I taught all semester, was with both of them. And what I learned was that the students who were at home on technology didn't really want to interact with the students who were in the classroom, and the ones who were in the classroom didn't want to have to take their technology out to interact with the students who were at home. So most of the interactions actually came through me. And I was fortunate because I had a screen in front of me that had, you know, multiple things on it, what was going on in the classroom, what was going on online. And so I was able to facilitate that. But in terms of working together during a particular class period, both groups were dead set against it.
Okay, so I did my little note, and in a minute we're going to go back to the big room. Does anyone else have anything to share before we all go back to the big room?
Just thank you, everybody, for sharing.
How did it go in your breakout room?
Great. We had an excellent conversation.
I bet you did. Do you want to share first what you all talked about?
No, I'm quite nervous, actually. Sure. We talked about several different areas. We did go off of the suggested questions, so I will apologize for that in advance. But one of the first things that we talked about was the low tolerance for ambiguity that students have right now as a, you know, probably one of the main causes for any sort of increased anxiety or apprehension that we're seeing, and how important it is that we be as specific and clear as we can without being overwhelming, right? So Dawn was talking about her daughter being in a class where the directions, the due date wasn't clear, right? It was like, everyone needs to be ready on this date, but you might not present for 2 or 3 days later, and just the additional amount of pressure that put on is probably not necessary for anyone. So just being conscious of those choices that we can make in the classroom is so critical. We talked a little bit about impact of masks. Dawn's actually using clear masks at her institution, which had been really helpful. Our university at SDSU is not providing those, and so we've not required that for students because there was some questions and dialogue amongst our group about the disruption, if the mask is a disruption or if that mask in itself is causing additional apprehension or anxiety. One of the things that we discussed, and I asked this, is do we think that CA, communication apprehension, is higher, or that public speaking anxiety is higher this semester? And there seemed to be some consensus that maybe those two items are consistent, but what we're seeing is an increase in generalized anxiety, not necessarily more communication apprehension or public speaking anxiety. And I think it's important that we look at the distinctions between those constructs as we consider these variables. We talked and people also shared several examples about the importance of building classroom community, which has been particularly challenging this semester, especially if you've got a high blend, high flex, high whatever kind of classroom formation you've got. But I shared the example here at SDSU where our on-campus sections are broken in half. And so half the students come on Tuesday, the other half come on Thursday. And it's taken twice as long to build community in the classroom, which has been provided additional anxiety for our teaching assistants. And Tim has mentioned it's similar experience at his institution as well. And so some folks shared some examples of how they've worked to create that community through the use of Zoom polls that they have active as students are coming into the Zoom session, so they can start right away interacting before the class time. Someone used an example of a roll call response that they take for attendance, again, just to create that interaction and keep people talking. And so that's a brief summary. And I probably didn't do a great job of taking notes. So if anyone else in my breakout room wants to share anything that I missed, please do.
You did a great job, and saying you didn't do a good job won't get you out of helping me again in the future, just so you know. So. But does anyone from, I think, were you guys one or two? Whatever, I didn't notice the number, but Josh's breakout room, does anyone else want to just talk about any other point or anything you discussed? It sounds like you all did a great job. All right, I'll do a quick summary from our team. Again, I probably didn't take the best notes either. I thought the group was awesome. And Anna started us off, and she actually mentioned that there was challenges with community that some of the students maybe didn't feel, because those of us who know Anna know she does a great job of building community. And then it just was more challenging. And we talked a little bit about why that might be. Jill mentioned, and I know Michelle has taught this way, when you have like part of the class physically there and then part coming in with technology that they might not connect or might not want to connect, and the challenges of that. So it appeared that community is definitely different. It looks different, it feels different, and we have to build it different. And so we just started the end talking a little bit about maybe how to do that. Jill shared some low stakes ideas, or like scaffolding for those early presentations as a way to kind of get that sense of community. Also too, she mentioned different options. I know I try to do that with my students too, to give them options of different ways they want to share their story, of different ways they want to present. And I think the more things I read, they talk about the grace. I know Josh mentioned this too yesterday, that we have to show grace to ourselves and to our students, but also to kind of what the purpose of our course is. It isn't going to, it may never look the same as it was, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So how we go about, creating these communities, which we know reduces anxiety. We also mentioned fairly early too about how the challenge, if you will, with technology, that for some students, the technology is creating another level of anxiety, while for others, if they're familiar with it, that's helping. I know for myself in the spring term, I was already teaching online. So when the great pivot happened, My students did not want to change anything in my class because they were very used to it. It was the one class that wasn't changing for them. And so we were kind of like the oasis in everything that was going on. And I think that is true anyway. I think because we often are the class where students do make connections, where they do feel comfortable with us, that we can be the place that they may feel comfortable trying new things, but also being more open to, oh, I'm going to try this on a Zoom, or I'm going to try this and upload it and things like that. We did mention that many students will record their speeches over and over and over again. And we all know that's probably not the best thing, but sometimes they have to do that. That generally increases their anxiety. But again, sometimes they have to experience that. And then you say, well, I wish I would have told you that. We talked about too, about creating safe spaces. Someone mentioned, I can't remember who, but it was such an important point, this idea of grade forgiveness and just being more gracious. Helen, I think that was you who mentioned that if the technology didn't work, it would not necessarily work against the student. And I think we all, can appreciate that. I don't think in the real world, I think hopefully we all have grace and understanding with each other too. There was actually, we talked a little bit about speech labs going online, which I think is a really great idea. I think a lot of people are doing that. And I wonder what that's going to look like in the future if we're going to keep that up in some way. I think that would be awesome. And I think, finally, this idea, and I think Michelle was the one that mentioned this, I think we're all doing a good job of focusing on calm anxiety and speech anxiety early in our basic courses, but that we can even be more intentional of that and making sure that we address it. No one is going to come to our classes who does not have speech anxiety and be like, oh, that sounds like fun. I think sign me up for that. We're not going to create more by talking about it. But what we are going to do is for the students who are deathly afraid of our classes, and for some, it is debilitating. When they come and they realize, most everyone has this and you're not alone. And that can be it's a simple thing, but it can be really reassuring. So I think how we do that, and as Michelle mentioned, that then sets the stage for them going on to their major classes. It goes on to, I think Joe mentioned presentations in like a nursing class. It goes on to when they are going to have interviews for jobs. So we can make sure we're planting that seed. I think that's what we have. We have a little bit more time before I share a couple final thoughts. And Josh, I'm going to ask you to do the same. Does anyone have any questions or comments, things that they'd like to share? We'd love to hear from you.
I was just going to say, Josh mentioned that at his university, one thing he didn't say, that they started or they added like an etiquette policy. He can probably speak to that, but a lot of us were interested in hearing more or getting that from him, so we're emailing him.
Yeah, so I just mentioned that because we were having some issues with students zooming in from their beds or in their pajamas or maybe not in appropriate locations. The university did establish a policy, and I'd be happy to share it with folks. And I'll put my email in the chat. You can drop me an email. But one of the things, and the reason I brought it up is people are talking about getting students to turn on their cameras. And it does, now that I'm saying this and typing this, the original version, it may have been updated, but originally it said that if you're asked to turn on your camera, you need to do so. The conversation came up with someone had suggested that students were pinning the instructor during the Zoom session. So even though they're delivering their speech synchronously, they're only having to look at their professor when they're delivering it, which was something that I would have not had even thought about. And so there are challenges, and they are students and they are crafty. So we have to be thinking about that as well.
Josh, how did your school get around the inclusivity issue associated with requiring cameras?
I'm not sure that it came up, Michelle. I won't be able to speak specifically to it. and I need to go back in and look at the policy to make sure that it stayed in there and that I'm not referencing the draft policy that I saw. I'm going to pull it up right now and I'll look while we continue the conversation.
Michelle, I'll offer at Penn State, we are not required to, we're not able to require students to turn on their webcams unless it's an assessment experience. So a test or a speech day, that's what the distinction is that Penn State has come up with. Not ideal, but it meets student needs-ish, and it meets my needs. And one of the things that I've tried to do is let everybody know way in advance when your speech day is, and I'm expecting you to have your camera on that day, so.
Right. I just stuck something in the chat. For those of, many of you have heard this before, but if you belong to NCA and you have not already considered signing the petition for a new division that would focus on communication, apprehension, and anxiety, I would love for you to sign the petition. If you'd like more about it, I have the whole kind of write-up that appeared this summer in Calm Notes that I could send you as well. But basically, it is just asking for us to have a division that allows us to explore communication anxiety and apprehension across all our different interests and things. But it's a home for the scholarship. It's a home for the interest. And again, if you have not noticed, we now have 5 choices of division affiliations versus the 3 that we did have. So hopefully that will allow more people to be able to broaden their horizons and select to support different divisions. That doesn't necessarily take away from, especially those divisions that are close to that magic number. We would not want to hurt that. So the link to the petition is there. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm constantly peddling it, so but it's something I feel really important, and I'm hoping the time is good for it. That's what I'm hoping. Josh, I'm going to give you a chance to offer a few parting thoughts. My couple, first of all, again, thank you all for sharing your stories and your experiences. Our students are facing a lot. We're facing a lot. And I think anything we can do to empower them and help them share their stories. And so I think probably the number one thing I would suggest or offer is for us to all think of ways we can reframe, how we can reframe anxiety as something that everyone experiences. How can we reframe our courses as something that they're really going to need? And how we can even reframe our assignments and what we're doing, in part because of the pivot, but also because the pivot is going to change how we are going to communicate digitally and in the workforce, and preparing our students for that. So reframe is my kind of word for the day. So Josh, what's your word for the day?
I can't say it out loud, Susie, but I'll just take a minute to thank everyone for coming here today. And I got to tell you, I've not heard it referred to as the great pivot. And all I kept thinking of, like, now we need, kind of reminded me of the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So now I'm thinking we need a t-shirt that's like the Great Pivot, Charlie Brown. Anyways, I just want to appreciate everyone taking time to come. And I would encourage you to continue to participate in the workshops that are being offered throughout the rest of this week and next week, and give another shout out to Fountainhead Press for their support. And I wish everyone a happy, safe, and healthy end to their semester, and much joy to you over the holiday season.
Thank you all so much. Everyone take care. If anyone else has a parting thought, great. I think we're going to shut down here pretty quick. So thank you all so much.